Deadzone Mercenary, the complete series, written by Liam Clay, narrated by Michael Naramore. Deadzone Mercenary, Book 1, Lost Jungle. Chapter 1. This country is supposed to be mutation-free, but the six-eyed dolphin pacing the hoverboat seems to disagree. So do the hybrid willows that rise at intervals from the methane swamp. Barked in livid purple, they have sentient branches that chase water bugs over the ivory-colored mire. The place smells like a cow's ass, too, although that has nothing to do with the Asian mutation crisis. The hoverboat is a wedge of pitted rubber covered by a camouflaged net strung over an aluminum frame. Its thruster fan propels the craft forward on a cushion of compressed air. Twin laser turrets have been bolted to the deck, one in front of the fan and the other up in the prow. Like the boat, they are scarred but of good quality. Blair is huddled in the stern, as far from her new squad mates as possible. Two of them are seated in the ship's waist, killing time in various ways. And the other two are further forward, one driving, one spotting. They've been on the water for 9 hours, and in that time, not a word has been spoken among them. Total strangers might stay so silent, or a tight-knit team, but nobody in between. All four of them seem completely relaxed, though, which is annoying. Blair's nerves are shot. As a distraction, she plays back the mission outline she was given before boarding. The words scroll across her retinal overlay in blue text. 12 weeks ago, a volcano inside a Laos dead zone started to spew yellow smoke over the surrounding jungle. In the nearby town of, name redacted, residents began to experience euphoric hallucinations. Some of the victims displayed signs of addiction and followed the smoke trail into the dead zone. The town's mayor has hired you to rescue them, decommission the volcano, and kill those responsible. Not much info to base a life-altering decision on, but the chain mercenaries have something Blair wants. And worse, they know just how much she wants it. So when they asked her to run a few missions for them as a prepayment, there was no choice but to accept. So here she is, dead center in the middle of nowhere, sharing space with members of a mercenary guild widely known to be full of nut jobs. Speaking of which, one of those nut jobs looks like he's finally going to acknowledge her existence. Blair wonders what he makes of her compact frame, weather-darkened skin, and mestizo Peruvian features. Probably not much, which is just how she likes it. As for him, the guy is tall and cadaverously thin, like he's been stretched on a torturer's rack. His wiry red hair is shaved almost to the scalp. Sunken cheeks underscore pale gray eyes with oversized irises. A dermal implant on his neck looks new and wildly illegal, and composite tendons trace the backs of both hands just below the skin. At the moment, he's slouched down on a bench with his legs up. But despite this stance, there is something volatile about the man, like he's getting ready to jump right out of his skin. "What's your name, noob?" he asks her. His voice is scratchy, with a faint Irish accent overlaid by something unfamiliar. "Blair?" she says cautiously. "What's yours?" "I'm Ivo. And that," he indicates the mercenary across from him, "is Tui. We're in love." The object of his affection is a heavily built Maori woman with tribal tattoos across her neck and face. "Get fucked," she says without looking up from the katana she's been polishing for the past 9 hours. "Okay, so maybe not love in its traditional form," Ivo allows. "But we do hook up occasionally. So keep your hands off her, all right?" "That won't be a problem," Blair tells him. Then it's the menfolk for you, I assume." "Do I have a shot?" "Sorry, I'm married to my gun," she replies sarcastically. Ivo grins.
You jest, but if you're going to tie the knot with an inanimate object, you could do a lot worse.
Blair looks down at the weapon they've given her. It lends new meaning to the term sidearm, as it is literally strapped to the side of her right shoulder and bicep. Its tripled barrels end just below her elbow. They are attached to a low-profile forestock with a rotating chamber. A detachable magazine sits above that, curving over her shoulder muscle to spread the weight. The weapon has been synced to the trigger glove she wears over her right hand.
That's a VT-21, better known as an arm gun, Ivo says. We all have them. Although, as a world-class marksman, I carry a more refined weapon as well.
The Maori woman snorts.
Don't listen to a word this loser says, girl. I've seen him lose a gunfight to the broadside of a barn. And sure, the VTs are good, but they can't replace a melee weapon. Did you bring one?
Blair puts on a confused face. What, you mean that sword of yours isn't basic issue? Tui looks mortally offended.
Since you're new and probably about to die, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that.
She fondles, there's no better word to describe it, the blade in her lap.
This is an ancient family heirloom, passed down from generation to generation. But just those 2 generations, Ivo points out. Your dad won it off another Ronin in a Tokyo bar just before the Nipponese cultural cleansing.
The two of them continue to argue like the man and wife they apparently aren't. But Blair has stopped listening, because the landscape is changing around them. The swamp is now clutched between a sandstone cliff on one side and a mangrove island on the other. She has an idle fascination with mangroves. They seem like a mutation species, but aren't. So she turns to watch the island go by, which is why she's the first one to see the arrow come flying out of the trees. It hits Ivo in the neck, rebounds off his armor, and spins away into the swamp. A second later, the air is thick with wooden shafts, hissing out over the water. Blair drops to the deck. A barbed arrowhead lodges in the gunwale, a foot above her head. Heart pumping, she starts to prep her arm gun. Then she glances at Tui. The merc is watching Ivo with a smirk on her face.
Watch this,
she mouths to Blair. The Irishman is crouched in the bottom of the boat, hauling in short breaths like he's psyching himself up for something. Then he vaults onto the gunwale directly in the line of fire. Arrows strike his chest, legs, and arms, only to bounce harmlessly away like the first one. Blair stares at the man's micro-scale chameleon skin and then at the identical suit sheathing her own body. The material is an effective camouflage tool, but there is clearly no defensive trade-off. God damn, the chain has some nice gear. Looking back up, she sees that Ivo has raised his hands to frame his unprotected face. There is a lull in the attack. And then a lone arrow comes whistling out of the mangroves, aimed straight at the merc's forehead. At the last second, he snatches the shaft out of the air and snaps it over his thigh. The crack of brittle wood echoes across the water. The enemy shows their appreciation for this display with a full ceasefire. Satisfied, Ivo jumps back into his seat. They're just reverts, he explains to a bemused Blair. Tribalists who have gone back to nature. Nothing to worry about, really. I know what reverts are, she replies. I'm more interested in knowing how you caught an arrow with your bare hands. Tui sniffs disdainfully.
Isn't it obvious? He's an augmentation freak. Spends his paychecks on reflex upgrades and glandular mods. Shit like that. There isn't a back alley in Bangkok he hasn't frequented.
She clearly has more to say on the subject, but breaks off as the boat starts to slow. They're close to the cliff now. Its sandstone face is riven with branching cracks, and thousands of pygmy goldcrests have built nests inside them. Smaller than hummingbirds, with wings that beat twice as fast, they flit from crack to crack, seeming to vanish while in motion. Collectively, they produce a sound like water flowing through a subterranean cave. A ramshackle dock juts out from the cliff's foot. It leads to a crankshaft elevator that rises into the heights. The structure is green with moss and frail with age. The hoverboat noses up to the dock's edge. The spotter jumps onto the rotting planks and ties the craft off with thoughtless grace. He's young, no more than 20, and could almost be a local except for his haircut, which is straight out of a corporate space station glamour mag. The spotter jumps back onto the boat and makes his way to stern. He is joined by the 5th member of their group. Without having to be told, Blair knows this is the leader. He's older for starters, in his late 30s at least, and there's an air of command about him that only time can instill. A chain pendant of the old American flag hangs from his chest, a relic from before the Reds and the Blues divided the country between them. He's mixed race like her, half white, half black by her guess, with short frizzy hair and dark freckles across his cheeks and nose.
"So, here's the deal," he says brusquely. "Teams of 5 like this one are the chain's core unit. We call it a bond. I am its anchor and you are the links. With the exception of the noob who this explanation is for, you all requested to serve under me. So I don't want to hear any talkback or bitching. We're about to enter the dead zone, which means that it will be hand signals and verbal comms from here on out. Our intel says this is the guy we're looking for."
He presses a button on his wrist comm, and a hologram appears in the air between them. The target is a big man, broad-framed and heavy-shouldered, sporting the kind of linen clothes that gringos insist on wearing in the tropics. The anchor points to the image.
"This is Tolman Vasar, a ranking member of the Dream Carver cartel out of Turkmenistan. They specialize in drugs, mostly run-of-the-mill recreational stuff. But based on what we're seeing here, they may be moving into the weaponized variety. If we can take Vasar out, their entire operation should fall into disarray. We can clean up the rest of the trash afterward. Any questions?"
Blair raises her hand.
I have one, sir.
The anchor shakes his head.
"The chain isn't an army, so sirs are out."
All right. What should I call you then? We prefer AB.
Tui supplies helpfully.
And what does he prefer?
The samurai shrugs.
No idea. AB is short for all business. Me and Ivo have served 9 missions apiece under our good anchor, and neither of us knows a damn thing about him.
"It's $1,000 if you can learn his real name," Ivo adds.
Blair nods, starting to get a feel for the bond's dynamic.
Okay, AB. What can I expect when we get into the dead zone?
He looks at her curiously.
"Haven't you been camped out beside one for the past 2 years? Your personnel doc says you joined up in return for our help getting you across its border."
My personnel doc is right,
she replies, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice.
But since I never found a way in, I still don't know much about them. Is it true the DZs accelerate ecosystem mutations?
No, that's a myth. But the dead zones have become havens for hybrid species because governments refuse to go near them.
Blair stares out at the swamp.
So the mutagenocide has never come to this place? I guess that explains the dolphins and the creepy willows.
He nods.
They are spillover from the DZ, which begins at the top of this cliff. And most of the rest you'll already know. Radio signals don't work inside dead zones, and satellites can't penetrate them. That's why criminals love the places so much. What happens inside a DZ stays there. It's also why the UN tribunals are always breathing down our necks. They hate not knowing what we get up to when the lights go out.
Got it,
Blair says.
I do have one last question, though.
AB sighs.
Let me guess. You want to know if we've ever found a meteor shard during a mission?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is no. In the decade since the Met storm created the dead zones, not a single meteorite has ever been found.
A gleam enters his eyes.
But who knows? Maybe this will be our lucky day.
Chapter 2. At the anchor's urging, they crowd onto the elevator. Tom, the bond's youngest link, applies himself to the crank, and they begin to ascend. The bird sound rises octave by octave until Blair can hear nothing else. Her heart beats faster. This may not be the Deadzone she needs to infiltrate, but it's a step in the right direction. Then they reach the cliff top, and her inner dialogue stutters to a halt. A pristine cloud forest sweeps inland from the cliff's edge. Shadow worlds built of mist cling to the treetops. Bright birds form halos around them, and howler monkeys hold court in the highest branches. The jungle climbs in gradual undulations over hills and small valleys before giving way to a series of natural earthen ramparts. Stepped waterfalls slice through them like knife wounds, forming rock pools that teem with mutated plant life. And above these ramparts, the volcano begins. It is a lopsided triangle of obsidian rock with a vast pit gouged out of one side. A wall has been erected around the pit's edge. The mid-morning sun glints off machine gun nests and rocket pods placed along its length. Higher up, the volcano's cone glows a sullen red. And issuing from a crack lower down is a long plume of sulfur-yellow smoke. Directly ahead of them, an animal track cuts through a copse of date palms.
Masks on,
A.B. says. There is something ritualistic about the way he says it, and a shiver runs along Blair's spine. Reaching down, she unclips the gas mask attached to her belt. Its rubbery, microscale skin is designed to fit snugly over the head. Bulbous carapaces serve as eyes, with a similar protrusion for the mouth. Circular air filters extend from either side of it. When people picture the notorious chain mercenaries, this is the image they see, that of the faceless alien outsider prowling the darkest regions of the planet in return for danger pay. Blair never expected to be donning one herself, and she's still not sure how to feel about it. But when she slips the mask on, her uncertainty vanishes. It's like she's just had cataracts removed from her eyes. Every branch and twig is crystal clear, and when she focuses on something, the carapaces read her retinas and zoom in. The process is intuitive and natural, enhancing her body's natural abilities rather than replacing them. Holding up her hand, she examines the web of fine lines that make up her palm print.
Not bad, huh?
Ivo says beside her.
The eyepieces were designed for reading your team's hand signals from distance. Sign form is one of our biggest advantages in the DZs.
But I don't know sign whatever, Blair says.
Don't worry. We've got a newbie version we'll use with you. It amounts to pointing at stuff that's likely to kill you.
Oh, all right then. They strike out into the forest. The others have unsheathed paired machetes from scabbards on their backs. Blair does the same. The animal track passes between the date palms, through a maze of razor-edged ferns and out into light-dappled jungle. Luminous spiderwebs span the spaces between tree trunks. The terrain remains flat for some time, and then drops into one of the valleys she noted earlier. It grows hotter. Dark, dripping branches close in over their heads. Blair's breathing sounds overloud inside her mask, and her armor is riding up into places it has no business being. But complaining has never been her style. About an hour into the journey, they reach a sandy gully ringed by vine-strangled trees. A shallow pond occupies one end of the depression, with animal tracks leading up to it. Very little light penetrates here. Ivo is in the lead. As he passes between the dead trees, Blair hears a quick double beep. The link reacts instantly.
Trip bomb!
And then he throws himself into the gully. Blair dives into the underbrush, arms wrapped around her head. But there is no explosion. Instead, 5 Laotians charge down through the trees. But whatever they expected to find, it clearly wasn't a machete-wielding Irishman in a bug mask. Ivo bulls into them, blades flashing in the dim light. The Laotians retreat deeper into the gully. Then their leader nears the pond and the ground swallows him to the knees. Everyone except Blair and Tom are in the gully now, rushing to Ivo's defense. But their attack slows as 2 more Laotians fall into the quicksand that surrounds the pool. Then the water roils, and a horror of a creature surges up into the fight. The crocodile is huge, at least 20 feet long from teeth to tail, and heavily mutated as well. Its jaws open sideways instead of vertically, and its legs are longer than they should be, with curved claws the lengths of Blair's forearm. Rearing up out of the pond, it lunges at the Laotian leader, mouth yawning impossibly wide. Then Blair catches a flicker of movement to her right. She turns in time to see Tom hurl an incendiary harpoon. The telescoping spear flies across the gully and sinks into the crocodile's flank. The weapon glows red for a brief instant, and then it explodes. Chunks of seared flesh fly everywhere. The animal makes a terrible sound, rolls over, and sinks down out of sight. For at least 5 seconds, nobody moves. Then Ivo starts to laugh.
Holy shit, Tom! That was awesome!
Without considering why, Blair takes a length of rope from her pack. Then she slides down into the gully and throws one end to the nearest Laotian. Only afterward does she look to AB for permission, but he just nods, telling her to get on with it. A few minutes later, the locals are back on dry land. The fight has gone out of them. They sit in a circle on the sandy ground, watching the mercs with naked fear. AB takes a moment to study their clothing and gear, none of which is military in nature. Then he starts to speak in what sounds like a local dialect. Blair is impressed until she realizes that his mask's mouthpiece is translating for him in a voice indistinguishable from his own.
You are poachers, yes?
He says. It depends who's asking, one of the Laotians replies. Are you from the government? As they talk, Blair's mask translates their words into English for her. The Yanker shakes his head.
No, we're mercenaries sent to deal with whoever is doing that.
He points up through the jungle canopy to where the yellow smoke trail is clearly visible. The man doesn't reply, but his body language changes. Where he had looked fearful and resigned, now he seems cautiously hopeful.
Have you encountered the people responsible? AB prompts.
Yes, the leader says. There are a few dozen of them. Some never leave their fortress higher up on the volcano, and the rest operate the farm.
And where is this farm?
In a cleared field about 1 kilometer from here. He pauses. What are you going to do with us?
Nothing, so long as you keep answering my questions. Now, have you seen this man?
AB types a command into his wristcom, and Tolman Vassar's image appears in the air. Its appearance startles the other poachers, but the leader doesn't react. Yes, but only from a distance. He paces the fortress walls every night at sundown.
Every night?
Without fail. There is something mechanical about him. Not his body, though, but his movements. He seems like a man of rigid routine.
Does he ever come down to the farm?
Not that I've seen. We don't go near there, though. They shoot at us if we do.
And otherwise?
They leave us alone. But the sounds we hear from the fortress are punishment enough. I don't know what they do inside, but people are dying. The man shudders. I lost 2 crew members to the place myself.
They followed the smoke trail?
He nods. We couldn't stop them.
I moved our camp to the lee side of the volcano after that, where the smoke doesn't go. And what is the best way to reach the fortress?
There is only one route. Just beyond the farm, a ravine cuts straight up the mountainside. You must use that.
Can we reach it without being seen by the guards at the farm?
With the tech you people have? Possibly. But I doubt it. They've set up hundreds of laser motion sensors like the one you tripped. But where ours are meant for animals, they are hunting human prey.
The anchor nods.
All right. You're free to go. But if the cartel comes knocking, you never saw us.
They leave the poachers there in the gully. On her way out, Blair glances back at the pond. The crocodile's carcass has resurfaced. Its exposed ribcage looks like a canoe, the animal was so large. Insects are already swarming over the body, eating what remains of its charred flesh. Unnerved, she turns quickly away. The jungle closes in again, but the ground is sloping upward now, and the trees are set further apart. 20 minutes later, the forest gives way to a field of tall grass that sways gently in the breeze. Burrowed holes dot the plain. The earthen ramparts she saw earlier scale up from its far side. Blair squints, and her mask ratchets in. Now she can see the ravine the poacher was talking about. Then her gaze travels downward, and there, guarding the ravine's mouth, is the farm. Covering more than a square kilometer of land, the compound is divided into fenced quadrants. Barbed wire abounds, and there are watchtowers at its corners and the midpoint of each side. The towers are occupied by guards equipped with binoculars and megaphones. She sees artillery pieces as well, and large crates of ammunition.
Looks pretty heavy,
Tui observes.
I don't think we'd be going around that.
Ivo nods.
And I'd be worried about the cartel sneaking up on us anyway once we get into that ravine. Me too,
The anchor replies.
So, we go straight through it then.
Or how about under?
Tom says. His voice is soft, lilted, and non-threatening. In fact, the link's entire demeanor is at odds with what Blair just saw him do. She has lived an eventful 25 years, but blowing up crocodiles is a new one for her.
What do you mean under?
AB asks him.
The burrows,
He replies. Blair waits for him to elaborate, but he doesn't say anything else. A man of few words, this one. AB seems to have heard enough, though, because a minute later, they're standing beside a burrow at the forest's edge. It does not look inviting. Mounds of gelatinous gray mucus surrounds the entrance, and claw marks score its sides. But the anchor doesn't hesitate. He jumps down into darkness, the others follow, and then it's Blair's turn. She steps off the edge. After a 2-meter fall, her boots hit dirt. The cavity turns 90 degrees into the horizontal here and heads off toward the farm. AB unclips a sphere torch from his shoulder and tosses it aloft. The floating light is string-tethered to him so that it goes where he does. They move out. Ivo has to duck his head to fit inside the tunnel, but it's big enough for Blair to stand upright. She hopes they never meet whatever dug it. With no satellite mapping to guide them, the Bond has to rely on guesswork to keep them on target. But this is still better than a straight approach over open ground. Their progress is eventually halted by a bare concrete wall.
The farm is right above us,
Tom whispers, although how he knows this is anyone's guess. Kneeling down, he dips into his pack and pulls out a plastic box containing a brown, putty-like substance.
Is that C4?
Blair asks Tui.
Something like that,
she murmurs. Tom wraps some of the ordnance in an olive-colored skin. Then he inserts a blasting cap, attaches a length of det cord to it, and sticks the bomb to the wall. Turning around, he walks back down the tunnel, stopping just beyond the nearest bend. Blair and the others follow. When they are assembled at a safe distance, AB provides their instructions.
That charge should put a sizable hole in the concrete. I'm hoping it's actually the wall of an underground room or corridor. That way we can pass through it and into the compound. They will definitely hear us coming, though, so be ready for a firefight. We go in hard and take no prisoners. Got it? Good. Tom, whenever you're ready.
The Link nods, closes his eyes, and fires the detonation cord. There is a massive boom. The tunnel rocks, and fire spreads along it, stopping just short of their position. But before the dust has even begun to settle, the bond is moving. They rush down the tunnel, expecting to see a hole carved out of the wall. Instead, they find themselves at the bottom of a full-blown cave-in. Without the wall's support, the surface has collapsed, bringing a section of barbed wire fence down with it. Through a tangle of broken stone and spiked iron, Blair gets a glimpse of blue sky.
New plan, the anchor bellows. We have to reach the surface before they surround the breach.
And now they're crawling, digging, squeezing through the rubble, trusting their armor to thwart the grasping tines of the barbed wire. Sweat is dripping into Blair's eyes. A boulder shifts, almost crushing her beneath it, but she rolls out of the way in time. She is most of the way up the pile now. A last push, and she reaches the top of the breach. Chapter 3. They've come up in a quadrant planted with turquoise stalks of some mutated plant. A herd of alpacas are grazing on it, oblivious to the situation developing around them. A few hundred meters away, cartel enforcers are spilling from a ranch house with a tiled roof and a broad veranda. Then a creaking sound brings her head around. One of the watchtowers is almost directly above them. Tom's blast missed the structure, but its support posts are attached to the perimeter fence that was pulled down into the breach. As Blair looks on, one of the posts cracks with a gunshot report. The tower groans, and then it topples over in slow motion. Blair catches a fleeting glimpse of an ammo crate in freefall. She ducks back into the breach just as the tower crushes a swath of turquoise crops. There is a second explosion, this one twice the size of Tom's, and over the roar of flames, she hears AB shout, "Go!" Blair's mind balks, but her legs are more obedient. With the others at her side, she jumps into the jaws of hell and discovers that the fire cannot touch her armor. The heat is intense, though, and a few seconds of exposure will cause her to black out. Luckily, there isn't far to go. She slides under a broken beam, runs through a last tongue of flame, and almost smashes into a cartel enforcer. He's young, with a bad mustache and eyes set too close together. She raises her arm gun, index finger curling. Her synced trigger glove interprets the motion. One of the weapon's barrels kicks, and the enforcer goes down with a heavy caliber bullet in his side. Blair doesn't know if he deserved it or what life choices brought him to this moment, but better him than her is the motto she has learned to live by. And now she's pelting toward a gate in the quadrant fence. She reaches it at the same time as her bondmates. Tui shoots an enforcer standing in the gap, and then they're running across a gravel parking lot that fronts the ranch house. ATVs and dirt bikes fill most of the lot, while a lone SUV is parked closer to the house. Without any need for communication, the bond slides in behind it. The enforcers are organizing now, and the SUV starts to take heavy fire. Then Ivo nudges Blair.
Watch and learn, noob.
He taps a case strapped under his armpit. It clicks open, revealing a folding sniper rifle with a laser scope. The gun's barrel ratchets up onto his shoulder, scope dropping sideways over his eye. Then he stands and fires 3 whisper-quiet shots in quick succession. The return fire cuts off abruptly, and Blair hears 2 bodies hit the veranda deck. Tui looks unimpressed.
Hey, asshole! You missed one!
It's better than you've done so far.
I took out that guy at the quadrant gate.
Oh, please, he was practically begging you to shoot him. Would you two quiet down? AB says. I think they're bringing up a rocket launcher.
I see,
Tui replies neutrally.
What do you suggest we do?
Split and charge.
He turns to Blair.
Noob, you come left with me. Ivo, Tom, and Tui will go right. Now scatter.
Blair is 5 steps from the SUV when the rocket hits it. The vehicle flips onto its side, windows shattering, hood swinging open. Then the gas tank sparks, and it explodes. The shockwave almost puts her down, but she manages to keep her feet. There are 4 enforcers left on the veranda. Distracted by the SUV's demise, they fail to track the Bond's forked attack. Tom drops the man who fired the rocket, and Blair takes another down herself. Then she sees a woman running away from the ranch house, angling toward a row of dirt bikes.
That one's trying to get away,
She calls to the anchor.
She must be trying to warn the fortress. Go after her, will you?
Switching trajectories, Blair runs after the enforcer, but she's already peeling out in an arching spray of dirt. Spotting a bike with keys in the ignition, Blair jumps astride it. The engine roars to life beneath her. She cranks the throttle and gives chase. Her quarry is circling around the parking lot, heading for the field with its burning watchtower. Blair follows her through the gate and across the quadrant. The enforcer navigates a corridor between the breach and the fallen tower, rides over a section of collapsed fencing, and shoots out onto the plain. Blair is right behind her. Changing direction again, the woman starts to head uphill. The ground grows rockier. The long grass thins from full cover to isolated tufts and then falls away entirely. The first ramparts of the volcano foothills dominate the sky. A slight depression deepens into a rocky defile marked with pools of still water. This is the mouth of the ravine that leads to the fortress. The enforcer obviously knows the route well because she drives between the pools at speed. Blair can barely keep up. The incline steepens as they leave the plain behind. The ravine's sides are terraced here and planted with what looks like marijuana. On her left, a hot spring creek runs through a winding bed. Steam rises from its surface, which is edged with rotting lily pads. Blair is passing beneath a hut on one of the terraces when bullets strike the rocks in front of her. She swerves to avoid them. The bike's front tire jams in a snarl of roots, and she falls over the riverbank and into the lily pads. Luckily, she lands in the bank's shadow where the sniper can't see her. Mosquitoes choke the steam-thickened air so heavily that she starts to feel claustrophobic. She looks for the enforcer on the bike, but the woman is long gone. Blair is debating her next move when she feels something on her shoulder. Then, a crimson stick bug crawls over her mask. She tries to swat it away, but the thing is too quick. It's inside her right air filter now, mandibuled teeth tearing into the layered nanofabric. Blair's earpieces amplify the chittering sound of its attack. Then, the stick bug breaks into her mask. It starts to bite and claw at her face, splitting flesh and drawing blood. She's about to rip her mask off when a leg goes into her mouth. She bites down. The appendage cracks like a lobster claw, and now Blair is drawing the creature's abdomen in too. She crushes the insect to a pulp, only allowing disgust to engulf her afterward. Then she spits the body out, reaches through her torn air filter, and throws it into the creek. She can hear bikes coming up the ravine now. It could be the Bond or cartel soldiers looking to finish what the stick bug started. From where she's lying, Blair can only see a short way back down the track. And if she raises her head, the sniper will light her up like a jack-o'-lantern. So she waits. And presently, Blair sees Tui riding up the slope. Using her mask's directed sound amplifier, she shouts, "Shoot her in the hut!" The Lynx skids to a halt and lets her bike fall. Then she scrambles up toward the terraces. Bullets eat the dirt behind her, but she makes it unharmed. Using the weed plants as cover, she activates a case on her thigh. It is similar to the one containing Ivo's sniper rifle, but this is a flamethrower. It unfolds automatically and clips onto the samurai's belt. She grabs its forehandle with one hand and twists. A stream of liquid fire spews from the weapon and the plants go up in smoke. While Tui is admiring her handiwork, the rest of the band arrives. They park their bikes just above Blair's position. She rolls across the lily pads, gets a hand up on the bank, and hauls herself onto dry land. Tom looks down at her and arches an eyebrow. "Hello, Blair. How are you?" He could be out for a Sunday stroll, and she has to suppress a giggle. Dangerous mercenaries aren't supposed to giggle, she's fairly sure. "Not great, Tom. Not great. A sociopathic bug just tried to eat my face, and now my mask filter is ruined." He smiles comfortingly. "Don't worry. Tui has extras. So let's help her with this shooter, and then she can sort you out." "Oh, so you can talk in whole sentences. I thought maybe you were a bit simple." There is a pause, and then she says, "You know, I'm feeling kind of funny." Tom looks at her mask and then at the burning crop of marijuana plants. "I can't imagine why," he says innocently. Blair is about to reply, but stops when the hut goes up in flames. A few seconds later, the door bursts open and a man stumbles out. But before he can take 5 steps, Ivo appears beside him. The enforcer swings his gun around, only to have the Irishman catch the barrel with one hand. Then Tui steps out of the plants, katana held high. Her blade shears cleanly through the man's rifle. He goes for his holstered Glock, but Tui's sword is already darting forward again. Like a viper's strike, it plunges through his belly and back out again. He falls to the dirt and does not rise. As Tui wipes her blade on the man's shirt, it dawns on Blair that these mercs are even crazier than advertised. What kind of person goes around killing strangers with a goddamn samurai sword? No one that had a normal childhood, that's for sure. But if this is the company she must keep in order to earn the chain's help, then so be it. Plus, she's obviously high from the weed smoke billowing around her, and that may be affecting her coping abilities just a touch. The band reconvenes on the path beside Blair's bike. Tom retrieves a spare filter from Tui's pack and replaces the bug-eaten one for her.
"What happened to the enforcer you were chasing?"
AB asks. "She got away when the shooter attacked me." Blair drops her eyes. "Sorry."
"Don't be," he says. "Deadzone plans hardly ever pan out, but that does mean the fortress knows we're here. And they will probably send men down to intercept us."
"So what do we do?"
Ivo asks.
"For now, let's get out of this ravine. We can figure the rest out later."
Tom points across the creek to a narrow cleft that extends upward from the highest row of terraces. "What about there?"
"That could work," the anchor says. "Let's take a look."
Leaving the bikes behind, they wade across the creek in single file. Blair's face itches where the stick bug bit her, but she's feeling guilty about her recent failure and doesn't want to seem soft on top of that, so she holds her peace. The cleft is narrow and full of brambles, but it delivers them safely out of the ravine and onto a ridge of broken shale. The going is much slower here, but their detour is soon shown to be worthwhile as footsteps echo in the ravine below. AB points to a ledge where they can look down without being seen. The band lays out flat, side by side on the warm stone. Presently, the cartel enforcers come into view. Tolman Vassar leads them. Watching him, Blair can see what the poacher was talking about. The man walks like an automaton, looking neither left nor right, and his subordinates behave much the same way. They pass the band's position without pausing, attention fixed on the smoldering marijuana field in the distance.
"Hey, AB,"
Ivo whispers.
"I have a shot. We could take Vassar out right now."
The anchor shakes his head. Negative. There's something strange going on here. I think we might have been fed some bad intel.
Wouldn't be the first time, Tui growls. What have you spotted, boss?
Maybe nothing. But I don't think killing Vasar is going to help us. Come on. I want to get a proper look at this fortress of theirs.
And so they keep climbing. The sun sinks behind the volcano's western shoulder, plunging the landscape into an early twilight. Half an hour later, their path diverges from the ravine. For a long period, they travel through terrain untouched by the hand of humanity. Blair's cannabis high slowly fades. The pain in her face doesn't. And then, above them and to their right, the fortress comes into view. Or its exterior wall does, anyway. Built of a slick gray substance that shares commonalities with plastic and concrete, it squats at the juncture between the foothill ramparts and the volcano proper. The edifice is at least 10 meters tall and 200 across. From this vantage point, the pit that it protects cannot be seen. But if the geometric sweep of the wall is any guide, then it is almost perfectly circular. Is that hole natural? Blair asks A.B.
I doubt it, he replies. It was probably created by an old strike from a corporate space station. Have you ever heard of a tungsten rain?
Blair whistles. You think there's a giant metal rod buried behind that wall? One that was dropped from space?
Looks like it. The corpses, that's what we call corporate employees, used to use Deadzones for target practice all the time.
Blair absorbs this information as they walk. The low-orbit corporates own half the planet, but they almost always operate through shell companies, exerting control via economic channels only. She could have done without knowing what else they're capable of. Night is closing in now, and still A.B. hasn't called the halt. Then they round a crown of shattered rock and a river is revealed above them. Like the lily pad creek, it steams with geothermal heat. The waterway curls around the fortress wall and cascades down the foothill ramparts. Blair follows it with her eyes until she is looking sideways across the mountain. And there, nestled between high walls and half hidden by mist, is one of the mutated oases she saw earlier. Colorful plant life explodes up its sides, but after the barren expanse of stone they've been climbing, it actually looks rather inviting. Ivo must think so too, because he says, "We're not ready to attack the fortress tonight, and I've seen worse places to camp than that." A.B. gives in, and they pick their way down into the sheltered valley. The geothermal river runs through it, and the bond is soon lost inside a chimney of swirling steam. But instead of growing thicker as they descend, it begins to thin out. A cool breeze sweeps through the valley's lowest places, driving the mist away from the river and the oasis around it. This creates the impression of a secret sanctuary separated from space and time. They reach the bottom. The ground is covered in a thick layer of soft purple mulch. After her encounter with the stick bug, Blair is wary of insectoid predators, but the only animal life she sees is a species of honeybee, and even they have a wholesome look about them. All told, it does indeed seem like a good place to camp. Chapter 4. They start to explore the valley. The mulch on the ground is the work of a purple-leafed variety of palm. Mushroom pods sprout from their lower trunks. Vines grow up the walls, and there are flowers everywhere. Their search eventually brings them to a cave with a sharp kink in it. Blair enters first, but her face is itching like crazy now, and so she walks right in among the strangers without noticing them. The bond joins her, and the two groups size each other up. "What do we have here?" Tui says, not unkindly. There are 3 of them, all locals by the look of it. One is a woman of about 50, She is short and sturdy, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a loose bun. Judging by their features, the other two are her children, twins maybe. They're about 18, a boy and a girl, both terrified and trying to hide it. The mother has picked up an ancient machete, but her hands are shaking around its grip.
I think we're scaring them, Tom says softly.
He removes his mask, and the woman must think he's Laotian because she starts to speak rapidly to him in a local dialect. Blair's earpieces translate.
Are you with the killers from the sky?
Tom glances at A.B. The anchor talks to him in sign form, and the younger man nods. No, he tells her, and his mask translates from the crook of his arm.
We are trying to stop them. How did you get here?
A muscle in the woman's jaw tightens.
3 weeks ago, my husband fell victim to the yellow demon on the wind. My children and I tracked him this far, but he was taken inside the fortress, and we have not been able to follow.
And why do you think they are from the sky?
Because a dropship delivered most of them here.
She points to the rock above their heads.
Straight from orbit.
The anchor turns to address his links.
This confirms my suspicions. Tolman Vassar and the Dreamcarver cartel are just a cover, meant to act as a smokescreen in case the Laos government comes snooping around. This is actually a corporate op.
Tui and Ivo swear in unison. What does that mean for us? Blair asks, trying to follow the conversation despite the pain in her face.
It means this is going to be harder than we thought,
Tui replies.
Messing with the corporates is a dangerous game. Their pockets are so deep, they've been known to lose their hands.
That was a terrible joke, Ivo says. But his heart isn't in it. He's worried too. The mother is looking from murk to murk, and now, in tentative but accomplished English, she says,
Will you abandon your mission then?
No, A.B. says firmly. We always finish what we started, even when we shouldn't.
So you will try to save my husband? This addiction, it was not his fault. He is a good man and father.
We understand. And yes, we will try to save him.
The woman closes her eyes, and when she opens them again, Blair reads a new determination there.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart.
It's the job, A.B. replies awkwardly. Do you mind if we sleep here tonight?
Of course. Can you take off your masks, though? My children are afraid of them.
The teenagers must not speak English because they don't dispute this statement. A.B. agrees, and they remove their headgear. But when the mother sees Blair, she hisses through her teeth. The others turn to look, and Tui winces.
Damn, girl, what happened to your face? It looks like you lost a fight with a wolverine.
But the mother is shaking her head violently.
Not a wolverine. Those are main claw marks. Very poisonous. You need treatment right away.
But I feel fine, Blair says. Then she reassesses. Well, maybe not fine. I probably just need to sit down for a minute. She takes a step toward the cave wall, intending to put her back against it. But the world wobbles, and she ends up on the ground. Just a minor setback, she says. But her tongue seems to have grown in size, and the words come out in a garbled jumble. The cave is sliding in and out of frame as well. The last thing Blair sees is her mother, bending over her with a damp towel. No, it can't be Mom. She is just a painful memory. But it is someone willing to care for her. And that is its own rare comfort. For a night and a day, Blair roams the margins of consciousness. Her face burns, and then goes numb, and then burns again. Her bondmates take turns staying with her, but she can hear the others making plans near the cave mouth. She becomes obsessed with the idea of them leaving, of continuing the mission without her. And just after nightfall on the second day, her fears come true.
We have to keep going, A.B. tells her in his usual even tone. But Napua, that's the mother, has promised to watch over you.
The walls are still spinning, but Blair doesn't care. If she can't complete this mission, the chain will never help her get home. But when she tries to stand, the anchor pushes her back down.
I'm sorry, but it has to be this way. You pulled your weight, though. So if we make it back out, you will be paid the same share as the rest of us. You have my word.
Blair tries to tell his share and his word to fuck off, but all that comes out is a low moan. And then he's gone, and she is left alone with her pain and her despair and the mother who is not hers. For 2 more days and nights, Napua and her children nurse Blair back to health. By the end of that time, she can sit up and keep down the strange fruits the teenagers bring her. The girl is named Akamu, the boy, Bane. They speak very little English, and Blair doesn't use her mask as a translator. She prefers to be alone with her thoughts. At first, she thinks only of herself and of the opportunity she has wasted. But as time passes, she starts to worry about the bond. Shouldn't they be back by now? Or have they completed their mission and left her behind? No. A.B. promised her an equal share. He wouldn't go back on his word. Or would he? Mercenaries aren't known for their morality. By the 4th day, Blair is walking again, and although she will have scars for the rest of her life, the paper-thin facial wounds no longer burn, which means that it's time to make a decision. She can wait here with Napua and hope that the bond will return. She can hike out of the Deadzone and forget she ever worked for the chain. Or she can follow the anchor and his links into the corporate fortress. While she's deliberating, something strange happens. The ground shakes, and the volcano's mouth glows red-hot for the space of a few heartbeats. And afterward, the plume of drugged smoke grows. A yellow pall descends over the Deadzone. It grows so noxious that they are forced to seek shelter in the family's cave. Blair tries to get Napua to wear her mask, but she refuses. Akamu and Bane do too. Blair feels guilty wearing it while they're at risk, so she doesn't put it on either. The mask sits between them as they huddle in the cave, worried and miserable.
It will be bad this time,
Napua tells Blair when the children aren't listening.
What will? The pilgrimage of addicts. The thicker the yellow demon becomes, the more people succumb. By tomorrow, they will be climbing the ravine in large numbers.
Blair chews on this for a while. And the corpses let them into the fortress when they arrive?
Yes. It is their whole reason for releasing the smoke, I think.
This, too, gives Blair pause. The anchor never talked about what might be going on inside the fortress. He preferred to provide info as it became relevant. But whatever the corpses are up to, it obviously requires disposable humans, and she is feeling pretty disposable at the moment. When Blair tells Napua her plan, she expects the woman to disapprove. Instead, she insists on coming along. It is the children who argue. But their mother has an iron will hiding beneath her calm exterior, and she will not be swayed. It is decided that Akamu and Bane will stay behind. The youths are worried for their mother, of course, and they make big sounds about wanting to come along. But Blair suspects that they are secretly relieved. She doesn't blame them. Early the next morning, they say their goodbyes and leave the valley behind. Traveling up through a vortex of mist, they reach the shale ridge and begin to descend. Some time later, their route joins up with the ravine again, And just as Napua predicted, a ragged group of addicts are climbing the mountain unchallenged. Blair is all for rushing down to join them, but the other woman counsels patience, telling her to study the addicts' behavior first. And, as usual, her advice proves sound. When everything is ready, they navigate the brambles, cross the creek, and join the dark pilgrimage. Blair is dressed in a spare set of Akumu's clothes. She has woven twigs through her hair and pressed down on her eyeballs until blood vessels there burst. The fresh scars on her face round out the look. Napua has done nothing to change her appearance. Instead, she channels concern for her husband into a disguise made of despair. Thus protected, they are both able to slip in among the addicts unnoticed. That walk is among the longest of Blair's life. Mercenary work is one thing, but this is another beast entirely. Her armor is gone, left behind in the valley. So are her machetes, her arm gun, and her mask. She has secreted a few tools about her person, but they won't be much use if the corpses figure out who she is. The unknown that awaits them weighs heavy as well, because, in all likelihood, they are voluntarily offering themselves up for torture. All around them, the addicts struggle against their fates. Some will briefly master themselves and turn back, only to succumb again seconds later. It is a terrible thing to see. And worst of all, Blair can tell that Napua sees her husband in every face. The ravine starts to widen out. In-ground holding tanks appear to either side of their path. They contain excess supply of the material used to build the wall. It smells of melted rubber, solvent, and tar. And now the edifice itself appears before them. Its face is perfectly smooth, and Blair struggles to imagine how the bond could have gotten over it. But she has no doubt that they did. The wall has a broad roller gate built to open vertically. It stands closed at the moment. And flanking it is a group of what can only be corpses. All 4 of them would dwarf Ivo in height, which is saying something. Their bones seem elongated, and they stand with the support of powered exoskeletons that attach to shunts grafted to their bones. Blair focuses on a man who appears to be their leader. He is wearing lab whites designed to fit under his exo while accommodating for its connecting shunts. His skin is so pale as to be almost translucent, with a sallow sheen to it. The whites of his eyes are yellowing, and his black hair is lank and thin. But Blair's gaze keeps returning to the man's hands. His fingers are delicate and disturbingly long. They've had artificial joints surgically added to them, and these bend sideways instead of forward. He is holding a digital clipboard, taking notes on the crowd of addicts in front of the gate. Occasionally, he will see something that causes him to whisper excitedly under his breath. And each time this happens, his fingers sway from side to side in an obscene rhythm. For a moment, Napua stares at the man with undisguised hatred, but she quickly reins herself in, averting her eyes and fading into the scenery. They reach an open space in front of the gate and stop. The scientist, if that's what he is, continues his survey, while the other corpses watch for any sign of trouble. Finally, the scientist has seen enough.
Laotians,
he calls out in a dry, reedy voice.
We have what you are looking for. But before we give it to you, I want to point out that it was your own weakness that brought you here. If you had been able to conquer your cravings, you would be back with your families right now. But you chose to abandon your loved ones for personal gain. So I do not want to hear any self-righteous complaints. If I do, your drugs will be taken away. Do I make myself clear?
Blair can barely believe what she's hearing. She didn't think assholes of this caliber really existed in the world. But then, maybe they don't. They exist above it, on the cold, dark fringes of space. At a gesture from the scientist, one of the guards activates the gate. It climbs silently up and out of sight, revealing a holding area with an identical gate at its far end. The addicts push into the enclosed space. The exterior gate drops down, sealing shut with a snap. Only then does the interior gate open. The crowd surges forward, carrying Blair and Napua with it, and the fortress is revealed before them. Chapter 5. It is a monstrous pit punched straight down into the mountainside. This cavity is protected by the wall on one side and a steep plain of volcanic rock on the other. The pit floor is perfectly flat and dull silver in color, except for a spot directly across from the gate, where an old lava flow has poured down to create an angular frieze of bubbled stone. With the exception of this overflown area, the entire pit is taken up by tinted glass boxes stacked 3 high, and inside each of these boxes is a human being. Most are slumped against the walls or curled up in the fetal position. There is something voyeuristic about the exposed nature of their pain, as though this is some sick museum dedicated to the torture of innocence. A forest of ducts and tubes surrounds the boxes. They converge in the center of the space, where they join with a single great duct that rises straight upward. A spiral staircase curls around it. Both structures vanish into an outthrust spur of stone that looms over the pit. Its underside is made of glass, and through it, Blair can see laboratories and dorm rooms and mess halls. This must be where the corpses live. When the new arrivals see what's in store for them, they turn and try to run, but the inner door has already closed. They claw at its segmented surface, wailing with fear. Blair simply stands and stares. She had known that something dark waited behind these walls. But this is beyond anything she could have prepared for. The corpses must not consider themselves part of the human race to treat members of it like this. Then her gaze travels back up to the laboratories, and she sees them. A.B., Tui, Evo, and Tom are locked inside a small chamber near the outer edge of the glass-floored labs. They are lying on top of one another, sprawled out and unmoving. Multicolored smoke fills the air around them. It is not the weaponized drug used to lure the Laotians here, but something else, which means that this must be a research and development facility. But for what, Blair can't begin to guess. A group of corpses surround the new arrivals. They carry electrified batons, which they use to herd the Laotians down a ramp that hugs the wall's interior side. It leads to yet another gate, although this one is open. Passing through it, they enter a sterilization chamber built into the wall itself. The corpses order them to strip. Blair does so, thankful that she chose to hide her tools on her body. Their clothes are thrown down an incinerator shaft that smells of fire and brimstone. Then they enter a bare room studded with copper nozzles. These emit a foamy white substance laced with lye and other hard chemicals. Blair wonders how much of this process has to do with hygiene and how much is psychological conditioning. Afterward, they are given gray paper suits to wear and sent back to the pit. Then the corpses start to divide them up. By standing near one another, Blair and Napua succeed in being assigned to the same group. The corpse who leads them away is bulkier than most, with a square jaw and a broken nose that was poorly reset. They follow her down a corridor between 2 rows of glass boxes. Napua's head is on a swivel the whole time, searching for her husband, but the glass is tinted just enough to obscure facial details. And besides, there must be hundreds or even thousands of prisoners here. So her chances of finding him are low. When they reach a section of empty boxes, the corpse halts and starts to speak.
Listen up, because I'm only going to say this once. My name is Sekral, but you are to call me Warden. From this moment on, I own you. Now pick a box and get inside. And here's a tip. If you sunburn easily, the top level is not a good choice. The middle is tolerable, I suppose, but the ground level gets fed first, so that's where you really want to be. Oh, and feel free to fight over the good spots.
As the prisoners race to claim the best boxes, Sekral starts to laugh. It is a high-pitched squeal of a sound that makes Blair's blood run cold. This woman is a sadist. The media depicts corporate society as elitist and technology-obsessed, but not violent. So are these people outliers, or is this the true face of the orbital world? A question for another day. Blair and Napua refuse to fight for their choice of prison, so they settle for adjoining boxes on the top level. Steel ladders give access to them. They climb up and crawl inside. Blair's door closes automatically, rubber edges creating an airtight seal. Her new home is a perfect cube, 4 feet to a side. She cannot stand up or stretch out. 3 holes have been cut into the glass low down on the cube. An iron duct fits over one. It connects to a larger duct that runs the length of their row. The other 2 have plastic tubes running from them. These must be used to deliver food and water. The tinted glass turns Napua into a hazy apparition, and Blair can no longer hear her at all. Half an hour into their incarceration, the sun clears the wall. The box starts to heat up. Blair is soon sweating profusely. To her right, she can see Napua's outline. The woman hasn't moved since being locked in, conserving her energy, most likely. The prisoner to her left is equally still, but there is something strange about the man. She thinks it's a man anyway. The tinted glass makes it hard to be sure, but his skin seems to have a bluish hue. And when he does occasionally shift positions, Blair catches glimmers of ruby red depicted in lines across his flesh. She has no idea what to make of it. Around noon, a mechanical noise starts up somewhere above. A minute or so later, a lumpy beige slurry spurts from one of the tubes and onto the floor. By the time water follows it, Blair is on all fours with her mouth to the second tube. The ration given to her is pathetically small, but she manages to catch it all. Then she scoops the slurry up with her hands and forces it down. But when the duct delivers its first payload, Blair is given only a second's warning. There is a sharp hiss, and the box fills with midnight blue smoke. And wherever it touches, her skin contracts, pulling tight across her bones like a canvas over a picture frame. Then she breathes in, and the sensation is duplicated in her lungs. Blair writhes on the floor, lost in an alternate universe of pain. At first, she is sure the smoke is killing her. But the ordeal goes on and on. The substance smells of tulips, rendered animal fat, and ash. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the smoke is drawn back out through the duct. She is left in a heap, convulsing in time to the beat of her heart. The sun continues to hammer down. The air boils around her. But the pain ebbs. Eventually, Blair is able to sit up. The first thing she does is examine her skin. At first, it seems undamaged, but upon closer examination, she sees thousands of tiny lacerations spiderwebbed across her body. And it could be her imagination, but these ruptures seem to be blue in color. And occasionally one will flare up ruby red before fading back to its original state. What are the corpses doing to her? Twice again that day, the blue smoke cycles through her chamber, and each time the lacerations grow more numerous until they are layering over each other like bandage wrappings. The speed of the transformation is terrifying. Already her skin has taken on a noticeable tint. And it is hardening, too, like scar tissue, but denser and rougher and everywhere. She had planned to study the operational routines of this place before making a move, but at this rate, there is no telling what she will be in a week's time. So whatever she's going to do, it will have to be soon. In the early evening, Sekrol comes to check on her charges. The setting sun throws her into silhouette as she climbs up to Blair's cage. The warden presses a button on a handheld and the door swings open. Fresh air flows in, sweeping away the chemical stench and replacing it with a jungle scent. The smell reminds Blair of Napoa's Valley, a place she already misses so much it hurts. When the warden sees Blair, her mouth drops open. Then she smiles almost sensually.
My, she croons. You've been a good girl, haven't you? Or your DNA has, anyway. Caleb will want to see you immediately.
She tilts her head to one side.
You remember him, yes? Tall fellow, fingers that bend funny ways?
Because it is expected of her, but not only for that reason, Blair moans and retreats deeper into the box. The warden laughs. Then she reaches in and pulls Blair out. Her exo assists the movement, making resistance impossible. They climb down the ladder and set off through the rows. And although her range of motion hasn't been affected, Blair's skin crunches every time she moves. Before long, a fine blue powder stains her gray paper suit. Sekrol claps her hands when she sees it.
You could be my ace in the hole, girl. Caleb isn't stingy with the bonuses for wardens who bring him promising candidates. And you might be the best I've ever seen.
Blair doesn't feel like the best of anything. She feels like one of the mutated creatures that Asia's governments are so desperate to eradicate.
And you will be rewarded too, Sekrol continues, if your DNA tells him what he wants to hear. Most of the scum here only get their yellow fix once a week, but he might up yours to a daily dose. Would you like that?
Blair tries to look as though she would. Shortly after this exchange, they reach the end of their row. A boxy guard hut sits at the junction. Built of cheap corrugated iron, it has a slanted roof and a single small window. Through it, Blair sees a cot, a fan with a bone necklace hanging from it, and a control panel showing a graphical representation of this section's boxes. Sekrol turns right and stomps off across the pit with Blair in tow. Then they round a corner, and the spiral staircase appears up ahead. It encircles the duct that delivers the blue drug from the laboratory to the pit floor. Peering upward, Blair searches for the bond, feeling guilty that it took her so long to do so. She finds them in the same place, trapped inside that glass-floored room filled with multicolored smoke. Sekrol sees her looking.
We caught them trying to sneak over the wall, she says proudly. Genuine Deadzone mercenaries, if their gear is anything to go by. Even I don't know what Caleb is feeding them. Something highly experimental, with an incredibly low probability of success, I would imagine.
That laugh again.
You're probably feeling sorry for yourself right now. But as you can see, it could always be worse.
They reach the spiral staircase. It is made of unpainted cast iron, crude and ugly. Blair expects to struggle with the climb, but doesn't. This earns an approving coo from the corpse as well. The staircase brings them to a small glass enclosure in the center of a large, square room. Steel cells run around the room's perimeter. Each cell has a round door with a heavy wheel protruding from it, and a small window.
This is the trial chamber, Sekral tells her. Prodigy or not, you will end up here eventually.
As they cross the chamber, Blair looks down through its glass floor. The entire pit is laid out below her, boxes reflecting the sun's last rays. It is a prettier sight than it has any right to be. The warden leads her into a bland, off-white corridor. A few 100 meters on, they pass a door with the words "confiscated goods" stenciled on it. Sekral takes a number of turnings after that, and Blair mentally maps them all. After what feels like forever, they pass through a set of double doors and into a quiet, dim space. Descending rows of theater-style seats lead to a small stage lit brightly from above. And on this stage is an operating table. It is empty now, but bloodstains fleck the hospital paper laid across it, and Blair suspects that until recently, a test subject lay there. Corpses in surgical whites are leaving the room through a door to the right of the stage. Watching them is the scientist with the triple-jointed fingers, Caleb. Once his students have departed, he turns his attention to them.
Good evening,
He says.
Sackface, was it?
The warden's expression darkens, but she keeps her tone respectful.
It's Sekral, sir. And my apologies for the intrusion, but I think I may have one for you.
The man's eyes take on a hungry look.
Is that so? Well, bring her down here, why don't you?
The warden ushers Blair down the stairs and into Caleb's presence. His eyes rove over her body, although not in the way she is used to dealing with. This man's appetites run in different directions.
Fascinating,
He says at length.
The metamorphosis is progressing with no visible side effects whatsoever. How long has she been with us? Only since yesterday, sir. She came in with the most recent batch.
Caleb's fingers sway with excitement.
This is unprecedented! You have done well to bring her to me. Now go.
Sekral doesn't move.
Sir? What is it?
He says impatiently.
Ah, yes, your compensation. Sackface, you will receive a 20% increase to your daily dose for the remainder of your contract with us. Now please wait outside.
The warden beams.
Thank you, sir.
Spinning sharply on her heel, she leaves the operating theater, closing the doors behind her. When she's gone, Caleb turns back to Blair.
What is your name?
She hadn't expected to be asked questions. Her features and skin tone could be from almost anywhere, but her accent retains an American inflection even after all these years. And it isn't remotely Laotian, that's for sure. So she points to her throat and makes a guttural sound. The corpse nods.
Vocal cord damage is a rare side effect of Melanex, the yellow drug that brought you here.
He gives her a conciliatory bow.
If I was responsible for this loss of speech, you have my condolences. I have refined Melanex to the best of my abilities, but perfection still eludes me. Now, let's have a look at you. Please, strip.
Blair hesitates, and Caleb puts on an ingratiating smile.
I am a doctor, darling. You can trust me.
Nothing could be further from the truth, but Blair does as he says anyway. This man is so used to being in control that he sees no need for guards, and she wants to keep it that way. When he sees her naked form, his hands flutter again.
Truly remarkable.
He gestures to the operating table.
If you would be so kind.
Again, she hesitates. Caleb looks genuinely confused.
What is the matter? Oh, perhaps you are thinking about the speech I made at the gates yesterday. If so, I would ask you to ignore my words. They were distasteful, I agree. But the wardens are quite insistent that I repeat them to all new arrivals. It helps with maintaining order, I'm told.
Pretending to be convinced, Blair lies down on the operating table. Caleb moves to her side and starts to strap her limbs into padded restraints.
For your own protection, he assures her. Some of the tests I plan to run are quite delicate. If you move at the wrong time, you could suffer an injury.
And then the implements come out. Blair closes her eyes and lets him get on with it. The scientist is a talker, and he speaks to her while he works.
You have no idea how exciting this is for me. I have been working on my pressure serum for 2 years, and you are the most promising result to date. If your vacuum trials go well, I will seek permission to bring you into orbit for an unprotected spacewalk. Just imagine it. If my serum is successful, we can create a race of humans who are impervious to the pressure-induced dangers of vacuum. Excursion suits would still be necessary to supply oxygen and block solar radiation, but they would be 1/5 the weight and 10 times cheaper than traditional EVA suits. It would be the biggest advance in space exploration since the corporates moved into orbit.
Blair hates this man, and more than that, she hates everything he stands for. To support their escape from this planet, the low-orbit corporates have systematically raped it of resources. But she can't deny the feeling building in her chest. It is excitement. What child, or adult for that matter, hasn't dreamed of being able to survive in space? The advancement Caleb is describing would change the world. Too bad Blair is going to kill him. Well, take him hostage and then kill him, but that's just semantics. Not today, though. Blair is still working through everything she's learned and needs time to plan. Plus, her tools are back in the pit, stuffed into the mouth of her water tube for safekeeping. So for now, she lets the scientist perform test after invasive test. It takes him over an hour to satisfy his curiosity. Before releasing her, he kisses the roughened skin of her forehead as though she is a child he is putting to bed. Rage fills her, and beneath it, shame. She has always hated this feeling of being possessed, kept, owned. It's like acid eating away at her calm. But in the end, patience wins out. Tomorrow is another day. She slips back into her paper suit while the corpse cleans his instruments. He glances over his shoulder partway through and seems surprised to see her.
You can return to your box now, he says absently. Sackface will escort you.
Sekral fawns over her as they walk back through the laboratory complex, but Blair barely notices. She can't shake the memory of Caleb's hands on her body. She is resilient, though, and by the time they reach the spiral staircase, she is starting to feel like herself again. But that changes when they return to their section of the pit floor. Napua has collapsed in a corner of her box. Through the tinted glass, Blair can see the Laotian twitching. Red lines mark her skin as well. Sekral notes the woman's distress and climbs up to her level.
This one's not looking so hot,
the warden calls down to Blair.
If she doesn't improve over the next few days, it will be plug-pulling time.
That night, as Blair prepares her tools, she thinks about Akamu and Bane. Their father has already been swallowed by this place. She doesn't want them to lose their mother, too. And there are her bondmates to worry about as well. For a few hours near dawn, the enormity of the task ahead threatens to overwhelm her, but she defeats despair through self-analysis. Blair should have died years ago. A sheltered child trapped thousands of miles from home in a world just starting to split at the seams. The odds were stacked massively against her, but she taught herself how to survive. And tomorrow, she's going to teach the corpses a few things, too. Chapter 6. Morning comes. The pressure serum flows. The sun beats down. Blair's skin continues to calcify, and none of it affects her. But in the next box over, Napua suffers. She needs to be freed from her cage, and it has to happen soon. In the hottest part of the day, Sekril comes to collect her specimen.
How are we feeling?
She asks sweetly. Blair swings her legs over the box's edge, reveling in the chance to stretch out. Then she nods. The warden appears satisfied by this response.
Excellent. Come with me.
Together they retrace their footsteps from the previous day. As they ascend the spiral staircase, Blair sneaks a glance at her bondmates. At first, their situation seems unchanged. Then her gaze falls on A.B., and she sees that he's awake. Their eyes meet. Blair points at Sekril and draws a finger across her throat. The anchor smiles and then goes back to playing dead. Although brief, this interaction fills Blair with hope. Whatever that multicolored gas is, it hasn't killed them yet, at least. They reach the trial chamber. Knowing what the cells are for doesn't make them any less disturbing. Quite the opposite, in fact. She doesn't want to think about what a failed human vacuum trial would look like. A short time later, Sekril is ushering Blair into the operating theater. Caleb is alone this time. If anything, he seems even more excited than the day before.
Ah, my star pupil, I'm so happy you've come. Please, disrobe and lie down. We have much to do. Sackface, you may wait outside.
The warden departs, leaving them alone again. Blair walks down the stairs, takes off her paper suit, and lies down on the operating table. The filter-scrubbed air is cold, but it has no effect on her tinted skin. Caleb steps up beside her. There is nothing stopping Blair from acting now, but she decides to wait. If something has gone wrong with her metamorphosis, she would rather know about it. The corpse straps her down and leans close, examining her skin with his naked eyes. What he sees sets him quivering with excitement.
Oh my God, this is really it! Or should I say, you really are it.
Taking a seat on the operating table, he sets his altered hands on her bare arms.
And I've been thinking, when we get to orbit, how would you like it if I introduced you as my niece? I have a sister planet side, and with the discovery I am about to unveil, nobody will dare to argue with me. This way you will be treated far better than if people knew the truth. You might even earn yourself an orbital citizenship one day. So, what do you say?
Blair smiles up at him. Then she rattles one of her arm restraints. The corpse smiles.
You would like to shake on it? Yes, that seems fitting. Just a moment, I will untie you.
Lying still while Caleb releases her is excruciating, but she manages it, and now he's helping her to sit up. This is the moment. Reaching down, she rips a clear patch off her inner thigh and slaps it against the corpse's forehead. Then she punches him in the same spot hard. The patch's seal cracks. He stumbles backward and then reaches up to touch the device, which is turned a toxic shade of green.
What is this?
He asks, too surprised to be angry or afraid.
They call it a skull crusher,
she tells him in English. It makes up half of a 2-part device. The other is a chemical pod implanted in my molar. If I bite down on it, the pod will release a reagent into the air that will activate the compound in that patch. And then, raising her fist, she mimes an explosion.
Oh, and the pod is synced to my pulse as well. So if I die, you will be right behind me. Standing, she moves to a wheeled pedestal that contains the man's instruments. Then she picks up a bone saw. But in case you don't believe me, if you do anything without my permission from here on out, I will chop your fucking head off. Do I make myself clear? A simple nod will suffice. Caleb complies in a daze. And then he says, I don't understand. I was trying to save you by turning me into a freak. Not a freak. The next step in humanity's evolution. Surely that is better than returning to the dismal town you came from. You're not thinking properly, Cal. Can I call you Cal? Thank you. Listen to my accent. I'm not from around here. Then, who are you? You know those 4 mercenaries you've got locked up? Well, I'm the 5th, and now you're going to help me rescue them. But first, I want you to tell Sekral to come in here. Who? Blair sighs. You may know her as Sackface. Ah! She points to the entrance with the bone saw. He swallows and heads that way. Blair slips her paper suit back on and follows, taking a position to one side of the doors. Clearing his throat, Caleb says, Sekral, I need your help with something. Can you spare a moment? After too long a pause, she says, Yes, sir, I'll be right in. A moment later, the doors burst open. The warden isn't carrying a firearm, but her exo could become its own weapon if she's given a chance to use it. Blair swings the bone saw at Sekral's head, but she jumps sideways as it comes down, and the serrated blade bites into her shoulder instead, severing a green wire buried in the flesh there. The entire left side of the woman's exo goes dead. She staggers away from Blair, barely able to stand under her own power. Not so tough now, huh? Blair says. You've spent too long in 0G. The woman flinches when she hears Blair speak. And then she flees down the theater stairs and out the side door. Blair feels a moment of triumph, but gloating can come later. She turns to Caleb. That was a neat trick, using Sekral's real name to tip her off. I can see why they put you in charge. The man laughs nervously, eyes darting around the room. I don't know about in charge. Senior, certainly, but... Cal, quit babbling and take me to my people. Your people. Yes, about them. I'm not sure how, useful they will be to you anymore. Someone, not me, you understand, but someone has been testing an experimental drug on them. I know, and you're going to tell me all about it while we walk. Now move. They leave the theater and begin a slow march through the halls. Blair is on a knife's edge, heart pounding in her chest. If Caleb calls for help now, it will be game over for both of them. She trails a few steps behind him, alert for any sign of disobedience. But he is on his best behavior, even exchanging nods with colleagues as they pass by. As for Blair, she has the bone saw tucked into her pant leg, and no one gives it or her a second glance. The prisoners here are caged by their addictions and do not need close supervision. They take a number of turnings, and the corridors start to empty out. Blair relaxes a little. Moving closer to Caleb, she says, All right, out with it. What did you do to my people? Please, I didn't realize they were your friends. And who knows, the serum might actually work. This is already the longest anyone has lasted, and just tell me. His shoulders sag. Very well. They have been exposed to a serum that is supposed to render them immune to radiation, but all of my previous test subjects have died from it. Then for your sake, I hope you got this batch right. So do I, he says fervently. The corpse eventually stops at a steel door set into a rubber seal frame. Your friends are inside. Then open it. Yes, of course. I just need to reverse the ventilation first and clear the serum from the room. How long will that take? Before he can reply, an alarm starts to echo through the corridors. Blair curses to herself. Sekral must have gone to security. And then to Caleb. There's no time to cycle the serum out. Just open it. But we will be exposed. Tell someone who cares. With shaking hands, the corpse types a code into a keypad beside the door. Its screen flashes a skull and crossbones at him. But he enters an override sequence, and now the door is swinging open. Multicolored gas rolls out. It catches Caleb full in the face, and he doubles over coughing. But Blair is already past him, rushing straight into the smoky chamber. She finds Tom first. He stirs when she shakes him and sits up. Blair is so relieved that she throws her arms around him. He returns the gesture without seeming to understand why. Blair, where did you come from? Embarrassed by her display of emotion, she retreats behind bravado. I'm here to rescue you, obviously. Can you stand? I think so. Good. Help me wake the others. One by one, they revive their bondmates. Of the group, Tom is in the best condition. Tui and Evo aren't much worse off, but AB is barely lucid. He is the biggest of them all, and Blair doesn't think they can carry him. But with a massive effort of will, the anchor is able to stand. They leave the gas chamber together. Caleb is on his knees in the hallway with 3 fingers down his throat. Vomit stains the floor. He must be trying to purge the gas from his body. Tui growls when she sees the man and kicks him in the gut. Clearly, they have been introduced. While her bondmates are preparing to move out, Blair looks them over. They seem weak, but no different physically. Then Evo gets a proper look at her. Jesus, girl! What happened to your skin? It looks like dyed sandpaper. Blair does her best to seem unconcerned. I got gassed with a serum meant to harden flesh so it doesn't bloat in vacuum. Cool! Say, is that an alarm I hear? It is indeed. Now, here's what we're going to do. She pauses. Unless you want to take over, AB. He shakes his head weakly. This is your rescue and your show. Okay. First, we're going to steal your gear back. And then, we're going to go on a murderous rampage through the fortress. How does that sound? Evo turns to AB. This girl is starting to grow on me. Can we keep her? The anchor smiles. I think we just might. Now lead the way, boss. Chapter 7. Blair lifts Caleb by the collar and pushes him down the hallway. He shuffles forward with the bond following. They've almost reached the confiscated goods locker when 3 wardens round a corner ahead of them. Before they can react, Blair gets an arm around Caleb's neck from behind. Pointing to the patch on his forehead, she says, Do you guys know what this is? Their expressions tell her that they do. Good. If I bite down or die, your boss man's head goes boom. And somehow I don't think that would be good for your careers. The wardens mull this over. What do you want us to do? One of them says. Just back off and let us through. The spokesman nods, but one of his accomplices must not agree because he goes for his gun. Blair reaches into her hair, pulls out a flash mark, and throws it down the corridor. The pill-sized bomb explodes in midair, releasing a spray of phosphorescent sparks. The blast momentarily blinds the corpses, and now Blair is in among them. Her bone saw severs the shooter's gun hand at the wrist. Picking his weapon up, she executes the other 2 with clean headshots. Once all 3 are down, she turns back to face the bond. Who wants a saw? For a long moment, they just stare at her. Then Tui accepts the implement without a word. Blair leads them around the corner, and there is the confiscated goods locker. Unsurprisingly, it's locked.
But she has one trick left up her sleeve. Well, not up her sleeve, but up somewhere. Her bondmates engage in a polite study of the walls while she retrieves the item. It's a piece of the C4 equivalent Tom used back at the farm. She fixes it to the door, inserts a blast cap, connects the det cord, and backs off. This explosion is smaller than the one that brought down the watchtower, but it's enough to blow the door off its hinges. When the smoke clears, they step through into the locker. Caleb has given up trying to cope with his situation. He simply follows instructions with a glazed look in his eyes. Blair shoves him into a corner while the Bond hunts through the shelves for their gear. "How did they catch you?" Blair asks Ivo as they're looking. His lips compress into an angry line.
It was my fault. I tripped a failsafe trying to hotwire a door lock, and the floor went electric on us. The next thing I know, I'm face down in a puddle of my own drool, sucking on cotton candy smoke. Aha! Here's our stuff.
He's found it all: their micro-scale chameleon skin, their arm guns, Tom's harpoons, Tui's flamethrower, and more. The others rush over and they start to gear up. Blair's armor is back in Napua's Valley, but there is no shortage of tech here, and she eventually finds a suit of body armor made by a rival corporate. It has no matching mask, which may explain why its previous owner never made it out of here, but beggars can't be choosers. Tui gives Blair her arm gun, and just like that, she's good to go. When everyone is ready, they return to the corridor. Then, the samurai points to a window set high up in the wall.
Look at that!
The smoke trail is still rising from the volcano's flank. But where before it was sulfur yellow, now it has turned blood red.
"It must be a message for the Corp's orbital station," AB says. "When the red smoke travels outside the Deadzone, their long-range cameras will be able to pick it up."
What do you think will happen then?
Ivo asks. "I'd rather not find out," Blair says. "And part of our mission is to decommission the volcano anyway, so we need to shut that smoke beacon down." Then, somebody shoots Blair in the back. Her new corporate armor stops the bullet, but it still hurts like hell. She spins around, looking for her attacker, but Tui is faster. She fires a directed blast of flame down the hallway. There is an aborted scream, followed by the sound of a body hitting the ground.
You okay?
She asks Blair afterward. There is something sisterly about her concern, and Blair feels a surge of warmth for the woman. But she squashes the emotion. These are colleagues, not family. And getting the two confused always ends in disappointment. "I'll tell you tomorrow," she says shortly. "If I'm still alive, that is." And then they're sprinting through the corridors, heading away from the trial chamber. Minutes pass. The glass floors vanish. They are deep inside the mountain now. The walls switch from painted plaster to bare rock, and the air smells of dust and cinders. Then the corridor opens into a vaulted hall dominated by enormous steel vats. They have entered at one end of the rectangular space. The vats are arranged in two long rows that hug the walls to either side of them. Their seals are stained midnight blue. This must be where Caleb's pressure serum is produced. At the hall's far end, there are two vats that look different from the rest. The larger is stained sulfur yellow, and the smaller is edged in crimson. Behind them, a glass viewing port looks out onto a vertical chute that plunges straight down through the mountain. A volcanic glow emanates from its depths. Then gunfire erupts to her right. She runs left, shooting all the way, and dives into a tangle of piping under one of the pressure serum vats. The Bond joins her moments later, dragging Caleb behind them. The corpse soldiers are dug in under the vats directly across from their position. Staying low, Blair switches her arm gun to its second mode. She has only the vaguest idea of what this setting does, but there's only one way to find out. She jumps up and fires. The black cone flies straight at the corpses and explodes against a shimmering wall that hovers in front of them. Shrapnel pellets strafe the containment field, but none of them make it through. Blair swears under her breath. The chain may have good gear, but the corpses are the uncontested champions of tech.
We won't get anything ballistic past that field, Tui shouts. Only slow-moving objects can penetrate them.
Blair thinks for a moment. Then she looks around for Caleb. He is curled up a few meters away, staring in horror at a shallow bullet graze on his arm. Blair starts to elbow crawl toward him. He sees her coming and tries to flee, but she grabs his ankle and holds on. Caleb, listen to me. My people can't win this fight. I see that now. So I want to accept your offer of safe passage into orbit. I'm about to call a ceasefire. When I do, I need you to get up and walk over to your people. You can negotiate on my behalf from there. Do you understand? Hope enters his eyes, and he nods. She takes 3 deep breaths, plants her feet, and stands. Stop shooting! I'm sending your scientist over to parley. She takes a bullet to the stomach before the corpses get the message. This one knocks the wind out of her and probably cracks a rib, too. Caleb looks at her uncertainly. She flashes him a thumbs up, only allowing the pain to show once he has started across the hall. As he walks away, Blair examines her emotions to see if she feels guilty about this course of action. Her subconscious weighs in quickly. Hell no, it says. Caleb has taken countless innocent lives in his quest for knowledge and power. She watches the scientist step gingerly through the containment field. Watches a group of soldiers come to collect him. Watches them realize that he has a skull crusher planted on him. Blair bites down on her back molar. For a full second, nothing happens. This is how long it takes for the reagent to spread across the room. Then Caleb's head explodes. The blast blows a hole in the nearest vat, and blue serum comes roiling out, half liquid, half gas. It engulfs the soldiers and keeps on going, revealing the margins of the containment field as it expands. AB fires a shrapnel cone to the right of the field. His shot hits the chamber wall. Shrapnel pellets rebound off its surface and enter the blue fog. Screams ensue, followed by silence. The serum settles into a liquid state and spreads across the floor to pool around Blair's boots. If corpse reinforcements trap them here, the Bond will have nowhere to go. They should leave as soon as possible. But first, they have to decommission the volcano, whatever that means. But Tom seems to know because he's already running over to the viewing port. The rest of the Bond joins him. It's not every day you get to glimpse the belly of a volcano, after all. They reach the glass, and Blair looks up. Far above, a misshapen circle of sky can be seen. Birds float on thermals there, and their nests have been built among the rocks. Then she lowers her gaze to the depths. The chute runs straight down for 100 meters before terminating in a seething pool of viscous magma. There is something so alien about this environment, so utterly other, that Blair is instantly entranced. But, true to his name, AB stays on task. Look, he says, pointing to the red vat behind them. A duct travels from it to a hole in the viewing port glass. It continues across the chute, ending at a wide crack on the far side. Then the anchor brings his elbow down onto the duct. The sheet iron crumples like paper. The red gas stops pouring through the crack, revealing a patch of blue sky, and starts to churn out of the broken duct at their feet. Where it mixes with the pressure serum, the substance bubbles strangely. Not for the last time, Blair wishes she still had her mask.
Blammo!
Ivo shouts.
Now maybe the sky corpses will never find out that the land corpses are in trouble.
Fingers crossed, Blair says. But we still need to do the same thing for the yellow demon. The Irishman blinks.
The what?
Sorry, that's what Napua calls the addictive gas.
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that.
He hooks a thumb over his shoulder, and Blair turns. Instead of a duct, a heavy pipe runs from the yellow vat to the crack. Even the most well-placed elbow isn't going to break it. But Tom has produced a miniature metal grinder from his pack. He fires it up and sets about weakening the vat's stanchions. Where did he learn to do all this stuff? Blair asks over the screech of metal on metal.
You wouldn't believe it if I told you.
Try me.
All right, then. Our young friend Tom is a Cambodian shark hunter. He drives around in a shallow-keeled boat off the coast of Sihanoukville, blowing up mutated fishies before they can eat his surfer buddies. So anyway, he's good with tools and explosives and such.
I can see that. Meanwhile, Tom has finished weakening the stanchions. You guys will probably want to move, he says. Then he spins his arm gun around to its third barrel and takes aim at the vat. The Bond dives for cover. As soon as they're out of harm's way, he fires. A sleek white dart plunges straight through the vat's shell. There is a contained explosion, and the structure falls sideways. Glass shatters as it hits the viewing port. Then the vat falls into the chute, dragging a squid's tail of pipes and hoses with it. Flames rise upward, venting through the crack in the far wall. The whole mountain shakes, and then settles back to an inert state. But the shark hunter isn't done. First, he flicks open an incendiary harpoon. It is much thicker than the one he used to kill the crocodile. Then he sets its timer, runs to the chute's edge, and hurls it downward at a slight angle. Somewhere below, Blair hears it lodge in the rock. A few meters away, Tui rolls over and sits up.
Couldn't you just have cut through the pipe and called it a day?
She complains.
I think you burned my eyebrows off.
Tom shrugs.
They could have fixed the pipe. They won't be fixing this.
Tui strokes her chin.
I see. Good work then, I suppose. But you still owe me a pair of eyebrows. Who gives a shit about your eyebrows?
Ivo says.
Tom just picked a fight with a volcano and he bloody well won. What was the harpoon for, though? That thing had a crazy heavy payload.
I want to destroy this laboratory, the Cambodian replies. So I set that harpoon on a countdown that should give us enough time to escape, but not enough for the corpses to disarm it if we get killed instead. Nobody has a response for this. It's probably a good plan, but there was something bone-chilling about Tom's line of reasoning. How often does he make terrifying decisions like this without consulting anyone? Blair asks.
All the time,
Ivo laments.
They're usually the right ones, though, which is a small consolation. Can we please go already?
Tui says. Ivo gives her a mock salute.
Yes, drill sergeant.
Then he sobers.
But seriously, let's get the hell out of here.
As they leave the hall, Blair takes a last look around. The place is an absolute shambles. She has fought for plenty of misguided causes in her day, and for money many more times. But in terms of collateral damage done, nobody can match the chain mercenaries. Do your missions always go like this? She asks Tom as they run back into the corridors. He considers her question. Yes?
Although we don't usually have to get rescued by some noob with a death wish,
Tui adds. I may have a death wish, Blair allows, but it's mostly other people's deaths that I wish for.
We've noticed,
AB says. The anchor looks better than before, but still far from 100%. Blair can only imagine what Caleb's serum is doing to him and the others, but long-term side effects aren't going to matter much if they get shot to shreds in the next 5 minutes. Chapter 8. This time, they encounter sporadic resistance in the corridors. Most of the corpses seem green, though, and Blair suspects that some have never fought in full G before. But at some point, battle always becomes a numbers game, which means that the Bond's only chance is to even the score. They reach the entrance to the trial chamber. It looks like the corpses have chosen to make their stand here. Blair had hoped to use Caleb as a human shield at this point, but that is no longer an option.
What next, boss?
Ivo asks her. She stares into the chamber, hoping for inspiration, and surprisingly, it comes. The glass-floored space has vacuum cells along each of its sides. The corpses have opened the pressure doors that give access to the cells and are using them for cover. They obviously expect the Bond to make a run for the spiral staircase, which is in the center of the room. But they've ignored a maintenance catwalk that runs around the vacuum cell roofs, completing a full circuit of the chamber. "We take the high ground," Blair says. AB nods. Then he pulls out a smoke bomb and tosses it casually into the chamber. In the mayhem created, they rush out of the corridor and up a staircase that leads to the catwalk. Bullets spark off iron as they climb, but smoke foils aim and nobody is hit. And now they're sprinting down the catwalk, strafing the enemy with gunfire every few steps. The corpses activate a handful of containment fields, but the Bond just runs around them, finding new angles of attack. Tom pumps a series of shrapnel cones into the fray, and this time they have a devastating effect. One of them strikes the floor at an angle sharp enough to crack the glass. This gives Blair an idea. Switching her arm gun to rocket mode, she leans over the catwalk railing and fires straight down. The blast blows out an entire section of the floor. Her bondmates catch on, and they start to decimate the margins of the room, until, with a crack like reality breaking, the entire floor gives way. Glass teeth rain down on the boxes below, shattering into smaller pieces on impact. And the corpses rain down with them. Not a single soldier escapes the fall. The Bond gathers by the railing, peering down at their handiwork.
Holy shit,
Tui says at last.
even for us that was something.
Sure was,
Ivo agrees.
but getting out of here is going to be tricky now.
Blair sees what he means. The spiral staircase is still standing, but there is no way to reach it. The structure rises into empty space like a madman's attempt to reach the stars. The hulking primary duct is untouched as well. It runs up through the spiral and vanishes into the roof above.
Do you think we can jump over to the stairs?
Tui asks the group at large. We've got to try, Blair replies. I have a friend down there who needs our help. The Irishman looks over at her.
A friend, huh? Who is it? An old college chum who happened to be wandering through this shithole of a jungle?
That's right, she replies brightly. We were state beer pong champions 3 years in a row. Ivo turns to AB.
I know the noob saved us and everything, but is she allowed to feed my sarcasm back to me like that?
I'm going to allow it, the anchor replies absently. And then to Tom, can you cut through this railing? The Cambodian nods and goes to work with his grinder. Tui sizes up the gap between the catwalk and the steps.
That's a long jump in full gear. AB, are you sure you're up to it?
He gives her a look, and she backs off.
Sorry, forgot who I was talking to. You'd rather fall and die terribly than wuss out, wouldn't you?
And you're any different?
The anchor shoots back.
Point taken.
Tom finishes cutting through the railing, and it tumbles into the pit. Blair hopes the boxes are strong enough to protect the prisoners from all this falling debris. Ivo looks down and then over at the stairs.
Shotgun not going first,
he calls out. Tui snorts.
Nice try, dickhead. Shotgun is strictly for the front seat of a car. If you'd called dibs, I might have allowed it, but... Oh, shit! She's going for it!
Blair has backed up to the wall of the chamber, and now she drops low, cants her shoulders forward, and takes off running. In her experience, jumps like these always come down to your plant foot. If she can get a good last step in, the distance should be doable. She takes that final stride. Her foot lands in a respectable position, and she throws herself into space. Blair hits the top step with her shoulder, does a half flip, and slams into the railing. It arrests her fall, and she ends up splayed out on the iron.
Her gunshot bruises burn, and she probably won't be able to walk tomorrow, but who cares because she made it. Ivo goes next. His long legs make easy work of the jump. Tui bowls her way across like Blair did, and Tom makes the leap with acrobatic grace, which leaves only AB. The anchor takes a different approach. Standing with both feet at the catwalk's edge, he does a powerlifter's squat and then lunges up out of it. He hits the top step in the exact same position and sticks the landing. "Nice," Tui says. "Weird looking, but nice." Then they turn their attention to the pit. The area directly below them is in chaos. Falling glass has ripped through the ducts and hoses that supply the cages. Blue gas is drifting upward, and precious nutrients are pouring out onto the tungsten ground. And there are bodies everywhere. Some remain intact, held together by their exos, but others have split open like ripe jungle fruit. Blair tries not to look at them as they start their descent. Partway down, a new sound comes from the sky. Blair looks up, dreading what she will see. As spacecraft go, the dropship isn't large, only 40 feet long at most. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in style. With its long neck, downward-canted cockpit, and tilt-back wings, it looks like a carrion bird come to feast on the fortress. It stoops low over the pit, and alights on the lava flow Blair noticed when she first arrived. A door on the ship's side opens, and a corpse platoon jumps out. Their exoskeletons are more like battle mechs. The things are so heavy that rock chips fly when they hit the ground. Each mech has a Gatling gun turret mounted to one shoulder and an RPG on the other. "I guess they saw the red smoke after all," Ivo says. "Crap." Blair shares his displeasure, but it will take the mech soldiers a few minutes to acclimatize to Earth conditions, so if the bond moves fast, they might still have a chance. "Listen up," she says. "The pit is divided into rows of boxes that combine to form a grid. Each intersection has its own guard hut. Inside, you will find a control panel, which you can use to open the boxes in that row. We're going to free as many prisoners as we can and overwhelm those mechs with sheer numbers. Sound good?" There are nods all around. "Then let's get to work." And now Blair is running across the pit as fast as her battered body will go. The sun reflects off the silvery ground, creating halos of refracted light that play across the surrounding boxes. She has a good memory, but all of these rows look the same. Desperation has set in by the time she finds it. Sekral's guard hut looks exactly like all the others, except for the bone necklace hanging from the fan inside it. There is no sign of the item's owner. Blair opens the door and approaches the control panel. Glowing icons are displayed across it. She presses a button marked with the words "Master Release." From outside the hut, she hears a metallic click. As a singular noise, it would barely have been audible, but in multitude, it sounds like freedom. Just to be a bitch, Blair crushes Sekral's necklace in her armored fist. Then she heads back out to the intersection and looks down her old row. Every last box has opened. A few of the prisoners are poking their heads out, confused by this break from routine. Blair will have to rally them to her cause, but to do that, she needs Napua. Blair runs down the row until she reaches the woman's box. Stepping onto the ladder that services it, she climbs up and finds Napua clear-eyed, blue-skinned, and alert. Blair hadn't realized how afraid she'd been for her. This box could have held a dead body, or been empty, which would almost have been worse. Instead, there is this flesh-and-blood woman hugging her fiercely. "I'm so glad you're okay," Blair says into her hair. "You too," she replies. "When they took you away... What is happening, though? Was it you who opened the doors?" "Yes. We've started a revolt, but we need the prisoners to join us or it won't end well." Napua pulls back. "How can I help?" "There is a guard hut at each intersection. They have control panels with master release buttons on them. I need you to rally the prisoners from this row and get them to start freeing everyone else. And after that?
Blair places a hand on her shoulder.
After that, I want you to go find your husband.
She smiles.
I will. And thank you for everything.
Blair is about to climb onto the box when Napua asks her another question.
What are you going to do?
She pauses.
The only thing I'm any good at. Fight until they're dead or I am. No, I meant after this is over, if we survive. What will you do then?
Blair shrugs uncomfortably. Accept another mission, I guess. In some other place like this, far from the normal world.
You don't have to, though. You could give this up and come to live with us. You would have a home there and community, and a younger brother and sister.
Blair tries to imagine herself in such a life, but the picture keeps burning around the edges.
Thank you for the offer. Seriously, Napua, it means a lot. But I can't. Why not? What is driving you?
They both look around as an explosion rocks the pit. The battle has begun. But the woman deserves some sort of answer. And for once, Blair wants to give one.
10 years ago, I ran away from home.
It wasn't a serious thing, just a teenage cry for attention, really. But while I was gone, something happened, and I couldn't go back. I thought that if I became a soldier, I could fight my way into my home again. But I was wrong. And now I have nothing left but violence and the promises of strangers to keep me going. Napua frowns, and then her head snaps up.
You're from Vault City, aren't you?
Blair looks away.
To me, it will always be called New York.
A second explosion rolls through the rows.
I have to go,
she says quickly.
Good luck.
And then she's climbing up onto the box. Settling into a crouch, she checks her arm gun. It still has plenty of ammunition. Time to go hunting. The boxes are set about a meter apart. She starts to jump from roof to roof, pain sinking beneath the wave of adrenaline that impending battle always brings. She reaches an intersection, and there, not 10 meters from her, is one of the corpse mechs.